The school year has come to an end, speech nights and all the rest. And my mind swirled over the many speech nights that I've attended. And inevitably, a school chaplain steps up to the lectern. I have more than a casual interest in how the chaplain will communicate with 400, 600, maybe 800 adolescents. Is there any real empathy in this situation? And as I observe, to my considerable concern, frequently nobody is listening. The chaplain speaks, the chaplain prays, nobody is listening. Not the parents, not the students, who are frequently nudging each other, giggling quietly out of the corner of their eyes, shuffling their programs, dropping them on the floor, or taking a sly look at their forbidden iPhone. And as I watched it all, I was suddenly transported back when I was an 18-year-old myself, sitting in a large school assembly hall. It so happens it wasn't a speech night that I'm recalling. It was a very important occasion. 600 students and staff, all gathered, waiting in murmuring readiness. Suddenly, everybody was on their feet as the principal of the school, unknown to most, but held in awe by all. And alongside him, his guest entered the room. No, there were no chaplains in those times. His guest was the minister of the highest profile church in that city at that time. Like several of my age, I was at a critical turning point of uncertainty and confusion, an 18-year-old, a time of concealed grandiosity, almost believing we could do anything, but fearing we might end up doing nothing. There was a fear also there, because somehow we knew we were facing a new world, post-war migration, post-war resettlement, the emergence of a wide cultural anxiety and ignorance into that untold potential of a new education opportunity, and a stronger unconscious sense that the world was now waiting for us, our generation. Then the speaker rose to give his address. You know, I can't remember the address. I was not into preachers. I was not into religion. But the extraordinary thing was this. He took a text from the Bible. And to this day, that is what I remember. He said, you're all going into a new world. You'll find yourself amongst different people. Walk where they walk. Sit where they have sat. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Now, I'm sure he did not mention the word empathy. But that man had delivered the most profound address on empathy. Empathy in a changing world. And he was heard. Nobody nudged the next one. Nobody grinned or giggled. Nobody dropped their program. This was the serious stuff about being somebody, being human in a different way, being a person of empathy, being a citizen of the world. Walk where they have walked, sit where they have sat, rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep, keep in harmony with one another. Empathy, empathy. Put yourself in their shoes. Recognize their pain and their weeping. Remain a person in yourself. Lift yourself and them into that great spirit of harmony. You'll notice that this address has perhaps unexpectedly or unknown why I have called it for you to aim for the empathy of Caravaggio. I suspect that some of you here will have never heard of Caravaggio and will know nothing of his works of art. So let me just tell you a snippet of him. He was born in 1571 and lived just short of 40 years. Born, and in those years, right in the turmoil, the convolutions and the upheaval of a huge religious reformation. Helen Langdon, in her book called Caravaggio, said he had an almost magical power and created wonder and enchantment. He developed into the most powerful religious artist of his age, creating a new Catholic art deeply rooted in the contemporary spirituality of the Counter-Reformation. Although he was feared as a very difficult personality, he became the most famous painter in Italy and celebrated throughout Europe. So what of this word empathy and Caravaggio? If you look at the paintings, the photographs of the paintings in this book, or if you've been to see some of his paintings, you will see the most detailed expression on the human face as if he knew it intimately. The compassion in the posture of each one, the awe created in the situation. David, the young boy David, holding up the severed head of Goliath. Or the atmosphere in the room when the doubting Thomas challenges Jesus to show him the wound in his side. Or the supper at Emmaus. I've spoken about this particular painting several times. There are two such paintings, but one of them shows an extraordinary engagement of anyone who looks into this painting. As Jesus breaks the bread at Emmaus, you see on the traveller's face this look of absolute astonishment and the outstretched arms as he realizes who this person is. Empathy, as if Caravaggio was right there in that man's shoes, depicting in the painting what he imagined that must have been like. So I say, would you aim for the empathy of Caravaggio? As I study Ottavio Leone's drawing of sketch of Caravaggio here in the front of the book, I see empathy in his eyes. I see empathy in his gaze. I see empathy in the face that comes alive on that page. Empathy. You know, there are different expressions of empathy. Newspaper editors put very dramatic, even hysterical and suffering pictures on the front page to sell newspapers. They think that will sell more newspapers. I call that manipulative empathy. Or there's another kind of empathy, your doctor. Yes, you want your doctor to empathize with your pain or your condition. He sees how you feel. He may even realize a sympathetic sensation of your distress. But she doesn't overdo it. Doesn't break down into loads of tears because of your state. There is a controlled empathy. That's the second kind. Or there's a third kind. Sometimes your doctor feels for you when you describe the raging fire that's down your throat, your sore throat. He knows what that's like. But when he puts his spatula on your tongue and says to you, say, ah, he stands well back as he looks down your throat. That's called disengaged empathy. I note in yesterday's magazines of the papers the advertisement for the 3D masterpiece, it's called, the film The Life of Pi. And it says, you don't just watch this movie, you live it. This is an engaged empathy. Various organizations play on your feelings at Christmas so that you will make bigger donations to their cause. So they send you the pictures of crying children or the soft, cuddly animals, or you might hear them playing somewhere the ever-enticing music so that you put money in their box. This is an evocative empathy that aims to move you from a cognitive empathy of knowing what it's about to an active compassion or a direct well-being otherness, if you like. There is the empathy of closeness and commonality. You empathize quickly with your daughter or your friend. You empathize more readily with people who are the same as you are, same country, same culture, same class, coming from the same organization, or they have the same passions. And you might even recognize the empathy of distance and dissonance. We need to see that there's a large flow in contemporary employment agencies telling us how we might understand more the people within the organizations, because they know that many organizations that do not have a good empathy with their workers or a good empathy with their customers are not going to be as successful as those who are empathic with their workers and their customers. So what is to be said? Many television news and so-called current affairs programs want you to watch. And the program directors want you to be captivated. It is good for their upward career, perhaps, but they want you to watch their program. A manipulative empathy, no doubt. But the program also aims, in many cases, to convert you from a cognitive watching empathy into a compassion, or to provoke your passive empathy into an angry protest. Usually that protest will go nowhere because you suddenly realize that you have no power. There is a powerless empathy that can breed a persisting sadness or an aggravating anger, and so we need to watch what happens after that. That empathy awareness in ourselves and for the greater humanity. And so Caravaggio paints the picture of Narcissus, who looks at his own image in the water and says, that's very nice. He falls, as it were, in love with himself and forms the basis of what Freud called the narcissistic syndrome. We're all part of that. It is part of all of us. So when you see that picture, you can see, yes, we all get into that narcissistic phenomenon. Equally, the most famous of Caravaggio's paintings, the beheading of John the Baptist, and Salome carrying his head on a silver tray, a silver platter, the gift from her father, the head of John the Baptist. You see Caravaggio's empathy with the terrible violence of those human beings. And from there, I suggest we need an education in empathy, a different kind of empathy. Do we curtail a man's violence by locking him in jail for 30 years? Do we bring an end to genocide in the world by executing the mass killers? What would happen if we insisted on a long course in empathy training from childhood? Because you'd know that very rarely is empathy taught anywhere, not even in the schools, in the tertiary colleges, especially for those people who are most concerned with expressing empathy or showing empathy to their patients or to the people that they're looking after. We need to see if it's possible to have an empathy training from childhood right through. This would not mean inflicting violence on them so that they would know what violence is like. It would be teaching them how to be a different human being in this 21st century. All of us are from time to time engaged in what I call a retrospective empathy. We re-envisage the dying days of a parent. We revisit great times we had as teenagers. We get excited to tell the stories, perhaps, of our first love. There are times when we lose touch with our genuine sadness and get stuck with various expressions of depression and melancholy, or various expressions of anger, and our repetitive self-punitive ruminations. Samuel Coleridge's poem finds its mark. A grief without a pain, void, dark and drear, a stifled, drowsy, unimpassioned grief, which finds no natural outlet nor relief in word or sigh or tear. With retrospective empathy, the life streams are running backwards. We need to get them to run forwards. There's a book on my shelves called Don't Look Back. I think that is too categorical, too severe. As if to say, see what happened to Lot's wife? That will happen to you too. Lot's wife, the Old Testament story. We are connected with our retrospectives. But life's task is to drain it of its negative energy and empathize with the images your imagination can create of the future, so that you see the flow of energy moving from the retrospective to the prospective. The images of the future need to override the power of your retrospective. The biblical text says it. Rejoice with those who are rejoicing. Weep with those who weep. Keep in harmony with one another and the best things of life. Or it's Christmas, and I'm talking about empathy. Christmas is a time for celebrating, I hope, the best feelings. Whatever your year has been, whatever shadow of sadness falls over your Christmas, it is still a time to celebrate the really best feelings, to celebrate the best empathy, to imitate the best empathy, to learn, create, and cultivate the best empathy. The Bible language in another place is a little bit obscure, but it says this: God was in Christ, showing that people could be in harmony with the best spirit, with the good spirit. So celebrate that possibility at Christmas, that reality. Imitate it, create it, cultivate it. Susan Greenfield, in her excellent book called The Question of Meaning in the 21st Century, has very telling chapter headings, and I've added a couple. The chapter heading says you can be nobody. You can be just anybody. But you can be somebody. You can be a person of enlightened empathy. You can be a citizen of the world. You can be a shaper of a better humanity. So many years have passed, but I've remembered those words of that man long gone from the human scene. Walk where they walk, sit where they have sat, rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep, keep in harmony with one another. Would you please stand? And the blessing. May the God you see in all the colours of creation arouse in you a sense of awe and wonder. May the God who is a sacred presence be real to you. May the God who is a source of inspiration and courage keep calling you forwards. May your God go with you and bless you today and always.